workshop to review the first review of the Ortonville master plan. This is a workshop. It's not a regular meeting per se. And the purpose of this workshop would be for us as councils to review the master plan and ultimately make recommendations, etc., such that when the final draft does come, that we're all in alignment for the most part, in the majority, to approve it, right? So, looking at it now, I mean, you know, some may or may not think, hey, it might be ready to go, and others may not think that. So the purpose of the workshop would be to review in detail. And when I say detail, I think the master plan, there was a lot of work that was done on it. So I think, in all fairness, we had to owe our time to that amount of work by reviewing it in detail. I think there's certain areas that we can go through fairly quickly, and I think there's other areas we can slow down and get to the detail of whatever may or may not be of a concern with each one of us. Now, my thought is, and I'm going to throw this out to council, is, so the question I would have is, how would we go about, as we go through, how would we go about making that recommendation to say, hey, I'd like to propose taking this back to planning, or hey, I'd like to propose to leave it the way it is. And Bill nicely provided these little Post-its. So hopefully every one of us have a Post-it in front of them. And my thought is, and this is, of course, I'm open to feedback, right? Because this is a workshop, right? And workshop means everybody's got input, not me, right? But this is my thought would be that we silently put a yes or a no. We give it to Bill, and Bill would count them. And where the majority is at, we would say that goes to Planning Commission. Where the majority is at, it doesn't go to Planning Commission, or we just leave it the way it is. But the whole purpose is such that I think, coming from this workshop, the majority should take it, or the majority should leave it the way it is. It shouldn't be just one person saying it should stay or go. It should, because we're all going to have individual. Pat, you might have an idea, you're going to throw it out to council, and you say, hey, this is my idea. I'd like to do this. Okay, good proposal, you described it fairly well. Yes or no? You put it there, and Bill will have the documentation of where within the plan we found it, where that change or may or may not occur, and then we move on.
Could I just interrupt and could we just call the meeting to order first?
Yes, I did.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
I'm
did.
sorry, I missed that.
So workshop, so let
that.
the record be known that for attendance, you know what, workshop, we don't need to do the roll call vote as a regular meeting, but for the record, Bill has got the attendance, right? So
Okay.
you've got,
Okay.
so,
Sorry, I missed that.
and for the camera, okay.
Well, 'cause what
Mark
am I-
Robinson's here, Mark Butsu, Pat George, myself, Dan Eschman, Larry Hayden, and Colleen Skornik.
Okay.
Dan, can I ask a question about the slips for you about if somebody has a point, throws it out there, and we discuss a little bit, and we all seem to be in consensus, can we just say, okay, yeah, we all pretty much agree? And
that's fine, yeah.
I think that might speed things up. If
It's faster, yeah, we could do that too. Yeah, I'm fine with that. So anybody else have any suggestions on the flow and the purpose of it? So,
No, I think that's fine. Do we want to put a time limit on tonight's meeting? Otherwise, you know, it's like we could go pretty long. Do we want to say that we'll be, you know?
What's our standard, 2 hours?
we've had standards up to 4 hours,
Yeah.
4.5 hours.
I mean, I'm just saying it's like we should have a time limit.
I personally wouldn't want to go past 8 o'clock. It's an hour and a half. But that's up to you.
I think that would be
That's 8 o'clock.
ambitious. I think that would be good.
And some of us got to work in the morning too. So, and if we don't get through it, we just have another workshop. And we mark where we stopped and we pick up where we left off.
So we have pretty much a dead stop at 8 o'clock.
8:30.
8:30 rather.
It's up to, yeah, we want to do 8:30, you can do 8:30.
That's 2 hours.
I'm listening to you
Yeah.
guys, yeah, 8:30.
Yeah, I'd propose that we see where we're at 8 o'clock, and then we either, if we think we can conclude by 8:30, we try to. Otherwise, we
I
just
like that.
then discuss when we can.
That'd be fine.
All right.
Off or something.
At least we're time watching
Yeah.
the clock, I appreciate that. Any other suggestions before we start?
No, I was just gonna make a comment about the workshop versus a meeting too, just because we can't make motions or voting in a meeting, whereas a workshop, I'm sorry, we don't do votes or motions in a workshop, so I just wanna make sure that the agenda or the minutes reflect that it's a workshop, not a meeting.
And it does say a
It's a special
workshop
meeting
on it.
workshop.
Special meeting workshop.
But yeah.
So in this case tonight, we'll be doing a straw poll vote, which means it's not a legitimate vote. We're not motioning and we're not voting per se, but we're straw polling to get a consensus or majority as to whether we move forward with a change of one way or another. All right? Straw poll is not an official vote. It's just someone's view of whether,
You can approve the agenda, you can make a motion to approve the agenda, or there's only one item on the agenda, so you don't even have to do that technically, you know, because it is the only
Yeah,
one.
and technically, we are a meeting of the council, so if there was a need to make a motion, we could technically.
well, we've
Not in a
got a
workshop.
quorum.
No, in accordance with our rules of procedure that we just adopted, we cannot do that.
Okay, maybe not according to that. According by state statute, I think we could, but if we weren't following those, then.
And if we're gonna get to, I don't know, if we're gonna get to the agenda,
Yes.
I would just like to make a motion that we change the order in accordance with our rules of procedure that were adopted at our February meeting, that it goes roll call, pledge, call to order, pledge, and then roll call, in that order, in accordance with our rules of procedure.
Well, we can't make a motion, I thought you just said.
Well, we have to, if we're approving the agenda, we need to make those changes.
So you're saying to,
It should be roll call, call to order, pledge, and then roll call. We don't have them in the correct order in accordance with our rules of procedure.
And that will be forever and ever.
Forever and ever.
until we change it.
Well,
Not tonight. Okay, I'd like to call to order this special meeting, workshop to review the Village of Ortonville Master Plan.
Good.
We did that.
that's what I said.
Yeah, you did that at 6:32.
Okay, let's,
Looking for that pledge, aren't you?
roll call is done, let's pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion to approve our workshop agenda. I guess we don't need a motion, do we?
Well, it was just as amended.
As
As-
Public comments? Comments? All right, and then the new business, the purpose in which I did describe is to review the Ortonville Master Plan and to make recommendations based off of what we have in there as to whether we want to change, edit, omit, add, keep, whatever it may be. All right, we can start with page 1. So I thought we just flipped through.
This is what you're referring to, the email that you sent out?
Yeah,
Okay, I just,
that's page 42.
42.
all right.
And don't pull that page all together because there's a forward and back, front and back on it, so it just replaces half.
Okay, all right.
Does, Larry, maybe you can answer this, the Village of Ortonville vision statement, where did that come from?
We collected vision statements from everybody on the planning commission, was asked to submit some, and I think we reached out and we took a look at other input. But we primarily took a look at all the different vision statements that were collected from the commissioners, and then we basically went through each of them and took bits and pieces of the various ones to come up with one that we felt was fairly comprehensive and embodied the general ideas that everybody had around that. So
Yeah,
it's kind of a compilation of several different vision statements that were proposed.
Yeah.
We had one in the past though, right?
We did.
So this was modified.
Yeah, this
from
is a
that.
new vision
This is a new
statement.
vision statement. And is that planning commission normally do that? Update
Yes.
the vision? Okay.
Yeah, I think they left out the two words "can be." If you're going to make a vision statement, it should be positive, not negative, and I think those two words does add a negative twist to it. But, all right. So we're just flipping through the introduction. There's a page number 2, it says uses of the master plan. Does anybody have any notes on that page at all? And then, if not, you can, this is open forum, guys. Just got something, talk about it, all right? Otherwise, I'm gonna keep flipping until you guys, till we see something, all right?
I like that concept.
All right, so, the next is and maybe, I don't know if it's out of, term, but there's a table of contents, and basically it's got 1 through 7, tables, and then there's also some appendices and some other tables and attachment identifications on what pages those are on. Page 3, the organization of the master plan, there's where your 7 tables of content are. Those are the introduction, Ortonville future land use plan, that's number 2. 3 is existing conditions. 4 is historic preservation. 5 is goals and objectives. 6 is mobility plan. And 7 is the implementation plan. The next page is the history of Ortonville. It's got a nice little page showing the old mill there, and then comments on Ortonville history.
While we're on that page, since we're all at it, was the idea of showing the old mill or the overhead power line?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They're pretty obvious there, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's on my list, is those power lines.
Yeah.
We had power outage again today. It's
Yep.
like, tired of the power
Yeah.
outage.
All right, so I guess it is the old mill then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just, are we
Not the
making,
old power line.
as we're going through, are we making editorial changes as well?
I mean, the editorial.
Yeah, there's-
Editorial, grammar, editorial?
Oh, grammatical.
Yeah,
Any
like
typos
page
or
9.
grammars, absolutely.
Now,
So
just
wait, before we get to page 9, let me get to page 9. But all kidding aside, I mean, jokingly talked about these power lines. I don't think it's gonna be the last time it comes up tonight, just to let you know.
I have that,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know.
All right,
If,
Power outage.
just so you'll know, if, and I checked with the source that, and had McKenna check, if we do decide that there's just a grammatical error or something, if that's the only issue you have, you don't have to send that back to the planning commission.
they just
However,
correct it.
if you get into where you're starting to change verbiage, or if you're
Change the
Content.
something.
content or something, then you do have to send it back to the planning commission.
Okay.
Okay. And it, the next page after that goes into the war memorial we have. Very nice photo. And then we go into the next section, which is future land use map.
Yeah, so it used to be Maple Street where my house is.
There's a nice section here. It does describe various building types. What I did notice as it was going through the building types, there was no mention of any senior citizen living. I know there's multiple unit, single-family homes. I know there's, townhouses and apartments, but I think the further we go into the master plan, you'll see that our village is aging, so I would have expected seeing some type of mention on senior citizen living and/or maybe not necessarily assisted living, but unassisted living, or some type of plan for aging.
There was a comment in, and I have it circled in there about the senior housing. And then it also, there was another bullet point about that we wanted to promote or encourage, whatever word was used, and have new development as single home residents. And here we have multi-unit, single family. So I guess which is it? Are we gonna refer to the multi-unit single family, or are we going to Or this is just what we have in the village
Well, I
now,
think-
isn't
I
it?
think-
This is just what, never mind.
That's
never
what-
mind.
Yeah,
That's what
I
we
think
have
this
now.
is just
Yeah,
a
it's just what
description
we
of
have
building
now.
types,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the only,
Right.
the question I would ask them is, this is just about the building types. I
Yeah.
don't know if it really is so specific for the use, because, I mean, you could do senior living in a couple different ones of these, like the apartments or the multifamily and things like that. So I think this is more about the structure
Of
Yeah.
where we're at today.
as
Yeah.
opposed to the
Yeah.
use of it.
Yeah, got
Yep.
it.
You had something on page 9, though, you said?
Yeah.
We're going past that, right?
Page 9,
Yeah,
yeah.
grammar, there was a,
M15 corridor, the last sentence in that paragraph. Outdoor sales / storage areas is screened. I would suggest that we change is to are. It's more than one.
Duly noted.
Yeah, that's a good
Okay.
catch.
Also on page 9, I had highlighted, if we're still on page 9, under natural preserves. So as everybody knows, the majority of this council, I think the ink is still drying on the ordinance that we had on the Ortonville Wildlife Preservation Park. So the statement that says that we have the natural preserve areas, significant natural features in the village such as wetlands and woodlands because of the environment limitations associated with these natural features. These areas are not suitable for development. So if you remember when we made that ordinance, we said that we were going to protect the that 55 acres to no development and to use it for public hiking in a non-developed way, such that it allows the wildlife to coexist with the plants and the wetlands and unobstructed towards dogs barking, fences put up, or gazebos and or whatever. So I want people just to remember that, because in the last sentence here, it says, however, small-scale buildings and structures related to the park or conservation use, such as gazebos, boardwalk trails, etc., blah, 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 that does conflict with our current ordinance as it relates to the wildlife preservation part. I just want to make that noted.
I would make it noted as possibly, because I kind of read something similar above, but that can even be stricken. Gazebos and things, it's a preserve, and we should keep it as a preserve for wildlife.
I think we did talk about that. I think one of the questions I would have is according to the deed over the village, it was supposed to be used as park and recreation and not to be developed per se, but I think that like natural pathways and things were appropriate. You talked about hiking, and I think if we really wanted to preserve it, just like any other state preserve or other conservation areas, that doesn't mean that you don't have any formal trails put through there. And when I'm talking about trail, let me clarify, I'm not talking about a 6-foot wide paved ADA compliant thing. I'm talking about like natural paths with maybe some wood chips or something to keep the mud down, where it helps to keep the people in proper areas within that preserve so that they don't go wandering off and potentially damage the more sensitive areas within that. So I think that that's what the concept was there, is that yes, we want to preserve it, of course, but if we are also allowing citizens and residents to utilize that property for hiking, then we want to make sure they have defined pathways to follow so that they stay in proper areas and don't go wandering into areas where there is sensitive vegetation and such.
So that is a good point, but to put a gazebo up, you're cutting trees down, make no mistake about it.
Yeah,
And to put a dog run in, you're putting fences up, make no mistake about it. You put a dog run in there, you're gonna make no mistake about it, you're gonna cut trees down, so to.
Well, I don't see a dog run mentioned in there.
Well, we'll read further into the master plan, Larry.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I like trustees.
Well, I was on page 9, so.
I know. Okay, so I like his suggestion to remove it from the,
I would be okay with removing the gazebos, but I think, you know, like if you want people to act, like in some of those areas, you've got like wet ditches. I think the only way you could get a person safely across that without having to walk down in the marshy swampy areas, you might have to put like a small wooden span just to cross some of those, you know, little ravines and gullies.
our ordinance is,
Yeah, but excuse me, that's defeating, in my opinion, the word preserve and nature. We shouldn't be putting anything back there. People can go back there today. We can go as you
Well,
know.
I would argue that because we don't have anything formal, it's been abused, because I've seen people have like put boards or logs down on their own. There have been people who have hacked trails through there, and that's, I know you said that
There-
people have driven four-wheelers around there. So
They
people
cut
have made
trees
their
down.
own pathways and stuff. I think if we have things where we say, this is where people can go, and people stay on those, then it'll help preserve the area better than just saying, oh, wander wherever you want.
Well, the fact is for 35 years, people that knew about the park have been wandering there. But there's wandering, bird watching, nature watching, and then there's people hacking down trees and building ramps and other stuff like
Yeah.
that. And that to me would be eliminating the need for people going back there and making their own stuff. You can go there like we did, walking, you know,
Hiked it last
when we hiked it.
Yeah.
And there's trails already there now,
And there's dirt trails, and there's
Dirt
trails
trail.
from people using it.
pathways.
pathways, yeah.
So,
Path-
And I think
Path-
that's,
Which are,
I think some pathways where it marks out where people are supposed to walk around through there, and then they try to stay on those pathways, would help to preserve the park. That's my view, and I think that was the concept. I agree, maybe gazebos probably not, but some of the areas, if you want people to be able to see and appreciate some of those natural features, you may need to put in something
So-
like a boardwalk in some wet areas.
well,
is the consensus to strike the last sentence?
yeah,
More than that, my recommendation would be to strike after not suitable for development. Anything after not suitable for development, because that does fall in line with the way our current ordinance states right now with no development.
Okay, my only other concern is that I know that when we got all the community on the use of that park, there was a large percentage of the community that said that they would like to see some kind of walking trails or something through that piece of property. And I think that's partly also why we included it in there, because we were also trying to listen and incorporate the community's input in the master plan. I agree that buildings and structures, we should probably scale that back and eliminate those things, because I think that you're right, that's probably not appropriate, but I think that we also need to consider the input from the community and make sure that we don't just strike out, you know, what the community was asking for either.
Just a quick question on that. Strike, I understand the striking the last sentence, but the appropriate use sentence, that
Yep.
kind of, that says that you shouldn't have buildings in those areas.
That's right.
So that's what you want, right?
That's
So-
what our ordinance states right
So would you
now.
want to leave that?
It says appropriate uses for natural preserves such as parks and conservation uses and other uses not required,
That do
not
not,
to require permanent construction of buildings or structures.
Right.
We can leave that.
Yeah.
Yes.
so consensus is to strike the last sentence.
Just the last sentence?
Starting from where?
However,
However, okay.
Now that change, would that would have to go back to planning commission, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's fine.
so,
okay.
how are we managing our changes? You're making those
I'm
changes?
making the changes as we go along.
Okay.
And like I got the R and I got that, and I make a
Okay.
little squiggly here and.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just highlighting the ones that were.
So Dan, before we move on, you're good with that so far?
I am. Yep.
Would you be opposed if there was some comment in there about, however, natural pathways may be okay to keep
They're
people
already
on the
there
right
now.
way?
That's right.
They're there now, and the ordinance states that there is natural hiking, undeveloped natural hiking back there right now. That's what the ordinance states right now.
Yeah, I just like the concept of having some markers to keep people on the proper trails and not just wander around willy-nilly. That's the only thinking I'm having with pathways.
Is everybody good with page 9?
Well, I agree with Larry then as far as it's going to be more structural work for the area, so. Anyway, can get lost pretty easily. And wander off in places I shouldn't.
And just for the record,
I'll
when
do it.
when the council approved of making that a natural preservation park to be used for natural hiking on undeveloped trails, there are many communities that have those exact same type of land designations where there is zero development, but allow the residents to be able to hike in a natural setting without the paths, so that it is, you know, unintrusive to the animals, unintrusive to the ecosystem, unintrusive to, so if you got class 2 wetlands there, whatnot, to me, leaving it the way it is, it's a rare situation, because every other park these days, they've got trails going right through them, and you know what, once you open up the gates, then I think, then we're adding things. That's,
I think the preservation should.
Yeah, we all did agree on
all right. So then you got different designations of different buildings, single family, multiple unit, single family, townhouses, apartments. You got the live and work buildings, the descriptions, and you got office and retail. And you got civic institutionals. The next I have is a future land use map. And it's got by color where single family residential, village residential, multiple family, mixed residential, N15 corridor, gateway, downtown, workplace, and natural preservation park. I think that should say natural preservation park.
Well, you got more than one area that's, more than one area in there, Dan.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because
the actual
it also,
preserve is
I
the
get it, yep.
zoning
it's
type.
got like Narren Park
Not the
and
name
then
of the
Duck
designation.
Creek area.
Should this map also have anything, because we're talking about future land use, anything for like community centers or senior
Well,
centers?
actually, one of the things
really,
that-
no, it should, only to the extent that if you were going to zone, if you want to zone for that or something, you know, like if you had a specific place, like the biggest call out on this is you've changed the school from
Public.
school public designation to commercial.
If I could share a little bit of information on that, Dan. When we were looking at the future zoning, there, in the past, we did have a public designation, but that was very restrictive and says you can only use this for certain public functions or churches, government buildings, post office, that sort of thing. And we said that creates problems because then if you have, like in the situation where the school closes, now you have a situation where it makes it difficult to reuse that land for anything else unless you rezone it. And we said, you know, the public uses are acceptable in any of the areas in here. So there's nothing prohibiting public use in any of the other zoning classifications, but to have a specific public one really restricts the usage on it. So we didn't want to restrict the usage on the property in the village.
So where's
That's
the
why we don't.
DPW, where's the DPW? Wouldn't that be like a municipal lot? there?
No, you
Right now,
master
it's
plan-
zoned in village residential, actually.
Yeah.
In yellow
And it's an
there.
acceptable use, yeah, in village residential. You know, public,
So if we wanted to zone, say, a corner of Ball Street and Cedar for the future site of a senior citizen, community center type.
you don't need to zone it specifically for a use like that. You can put
That's
that
right.
use in the existing zoning.
Right. Zoning tells you what you can do, and it can be a list a mile long, like he's saying. of-
Yeah.
You can have a multiple of things, a church, you know, a school, a civic center, or whatever, not civic center.
So it wouldn't necessarily be on this map. then.
No, this just tells you, this is just saying, okay, this is how we want the village to look. Now, the downfall of this is, an example would be, that we have some apartments over on Oakwood. We have this zone single-family residential right now, with the apartments over on Oakwood, for an example. It's our future plan. So that says in the event that somebody eventually wanted to tear down those apartments and put up new apartments, they would have to come to the village and get permission to do that, because that would not be an acceptable use in single-family zoned area, because that's an RM classification. So, and that's kind of where you want to be anyways. That's, you know, where you look over on Granger and we've zoned that an RM where the Granger apartments are.
Is there anything in this master plan that spells out a community center / senior center? Other than where, so there's no mention of a senior center or community center in here?
That would have to be an initiative in the back. When we get to the back, that's, you know.
There was senior housing, I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything
Senior
specific about
complex.
the senior, you're talking about the current senior center.
Yes.
Because the current senior center is there already.
Yeah.
And it's sitting in residential zoning, but there's
Right.
nothing that would prohibit a senior center being built in a residential zone.
Do you think, Larry, that could have been early on put in the, say, the survey or the public mix, so that when, if people knew about it, they'd be able to say, oh, that's a good idea, or,
What do you mean?
well, for example, the senior center, a real senior center, bigger than the one we've got, because it's dated.
Up-
Yeah,
You
not a
can,
lot of room in there.
Well, I didn't pick the colors, so.
No, it's just, it's getting very run down. I
Yeah.
mean, when I was in there for the camp, it's like,
So,
it's very run down.
and to advertise that you have a senior center in your community, is beneficial for those.
So
areas.
that's something you'd wanna do on like page, where is it? When you get to the goals and objectives. and
Yeah, that could
Yeah,
be a
it's-
goal.
You'd wanna
Just-
establish
yes.
as one of your goals and objectives is to put in a senior. And that's a perfect, good thing to say, hey,
Yeah, I mean, recreation
council
is
wants
another
to
thing
add,
that is-
council wants to add a senior center as, researching a senior center is one of our goals. And that's-
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I mean, we also
So you
have a
do
lot of
that
other
and kind of-
facilities like parks and ball fields and things like that, recreational areas and stuff.
Yeah, I was
And we
just-
don't have a special zone designated for those. It's you know, it's that those types of uses are appropriate in the zones that we have defined. When you get to the actual zoning and you see what each one means, it basically says these are the appropriate uses, and it does list public and community uses and things like that as appropriate in those areas.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind when you
Yeah,
get to
so
goals
this
and
is-
objectives, and
yeah.
just add that.
Yeah.
All right.
And if you got anything else like that, like that something was missed that you wanna add, that, you know, that they just missed, then that's the appropriate place to put that. Kind of the first 60 pages is more, we're painting a
History.
picture of the community and type stuff,
Right.
and
So let,
then the goals and objectives is where you hit all those initiatives.
so
What we at, 17 or?
17, 18, 19, they're all photos, descriptions, 21, gateway examples.
Yeah, I'd like to point out on 17, just the land use designation, this is exactly what I was saying. Civic or institutional uses may be permitted in single-family residential areas. Now here it says, but should be located only on corner sites. I don't know if that's necessary,
Are you
but I mean, it
suggesting-
does
Should.
show that,
Should
it says
doesn't mean
should, it
must.
doesn't mean they can't.
Right.
So basically, this is where it says, hey, these are allowable.
So are you suggesting that we change any of this?
No.
No, I'm just pointing out that that's already covered, what you were suggesting about civic use and stuff is already included in the land use.
This is more of the
regulations.
guide than you're saying,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, when you have a zoning, it's basically it means, hey, I want to put a church here. Okay, no problem. Hey, I want to put a manufacturing facility here. Nope, that's not allowed.
All right. Then you got the mixed residential descriptions there. Gateway design guidelines. You got some photos of existing current character of our village and planned character.
What page are you on?
This
Dan?
is on 22, I'm sorry.
All right, I'll look.
And then we have the M15 corridor. I know these are privately owned buildings, and I don't know how we're going to drive private owners to changing the building look, but, you know, obviously one looks new and the other one looks like it's dated. So how we get them to change, I'm not sure, but I can see,
Oh,
there's an obvious difference between where was it Ken's Coney there?
Yeah.
In the plan. And then we got 24, the workplace photos. You know, everything can't look new in an old community. And then we have the natural preserve. So there were some statements here.
I'm assuming that It's the same exact verbiage almost, so I'm assuming the last sentence wants to be deleted again because.
Yep, yes, where it says however.
Yeah, it actually should be word.
Yep.
Because I was gonna have it, parts corrected, okay.
Thank you. And then it goes into existing conditions. That was a little, we paid a lot of money, and to me, I was a little distraught over the fact that we didn't have current data in a lot of these charts.
That was
If you
my,
looked at 2015, really, it's 4 years ago, and we're doing a master plan
Yeah.
today, so why wouldn't there be current data?
I thought the same thing
And I
too.
think a lot of that goes to, in part, is what's available from the US Census Department. Because I think they do updates 10 years, but I think you can get 5-year increments.
Yeah,
And they're
they
talking
pull
in
all
the future
this
about
from-
getting more granular in terms
They
of years,
pull
but
all
it's
this
generally
from
every 5
SEMCOG,
years.
basically,
Yeah.
you know.
So how long ago was this the last time we did our master plan? When was the last time?
2008.
Well, it says the SEMCOG was 2017, they used that data. They used they used the
Okay.
Ortonville plan of 2008 to use some of this, and then the SEMCOG of 2017 and the census. So it's like, I'm just,
Yeah.
All right. So it has the demographics and housing, population characteristics and trends there. 29 is continued charts on our population and the age of our population and what it's projected to be all the way out to 2040 from 2015. I think this is interesting to note where we're at today. Well, at 2015, they're projecting that
We'll have more people 60 years and older.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, aging population, that's exactly.
so, and that goes towards my thought about a community senior center type. Next, page 30. Again, there's some old data, Ortonville 2010 and Ortonville 2015 when it comes to number of households, household sizes, etc. I just think that, again, that's 4 years old, right? That data is 4 years old.
disappointing to pay this kind of money for a new master plan and have our data outdated before we
Yeah.
even approve it.
Well, like
I
said,
mean, I
think
understand that
we're-
there's some
We're kind
things
of
that you
limited by
can't.
what's available.
I understand, it's just, you know.
Well, then maybe we time it next
We're doing a
time where
census.
when the consensus comes out on
Next year we're doing
real
one,
data,
2020.
right? Maybe you time it such that you build the master plan off that real data.
Well, you know, actually, if I do got a suggestion for that, then if we wanted to think about it, we could plan to do a minor update in 2020 where we update just this portion of the data, the census data. We could do something like that as a minor update in the future. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, well, it'd be 2021 because
By the time we
they
get
do the
back the
census.
results.
So they do the
They're not-
census
they're
late
not that fast.
2021. We could do a minor update on the
Yeah.
plan in 2021 or 2022 and
Yeah.
capture the latest data at that time.
Yeah,
All
we
right.
suggest every 5 years to at least
You
dust
can,
it off.
Yeah.
you can
Check
dust
out.
it off and update it anytime you want.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
you can
you're
do it-
supposed to do it every 5
You're
years.
required
Well,
to
you can
do
do
it.
it sooner than that if you
You're
want.
required to do it every 5 years.
Do we pay for the actual raw data, so the charts and the raw data that generated these charts, do we also get that data as
Other
part of
than-
what we pay for?
Other than the time that McKenna bills you to pull this data together, yeah, you pay for that. You don't pay for the data from,
Yeah, I think the data came.
Because the
from
resources
free
we've already-
and all that,
the
yeah.
resources are through the census and SEMCOG.
Yeah. Now, we do have the raw data for a lot of the stuff in the appendix that was the results from the surveys and the workshops and stuff like that, where we got people's inputs and had ranked things and stuff like that. So all the stuff in the appendices, we do have all the raw data for that, right?
I'm just saying,
That was
these are,
collected during the,
yeah, these are simple charts, right? They're Excel data, probably, I mean, to me, if we're gonna, talking about updating them, all you gotta do is update a cell and,
It populates.
yeah.
that's why it would
So you
be,
can
that's why it'd
easily-
be a fairly simple minor
Right.
update to the master plan if we did it after the next census.
It would be easy if we had the raw data. If you didn't have the raw data, now you're talking about generating a whole new
You gotta create
population and
the
recharting.
pies and all that, yeah.
Right,
Correct.
all right,
Where we
just a
at?
comment.
I think the data's available right on the US Census site, isn't it? We might have to convert it into the chart, but let's see, that's not
Are these McKenna's charts, or these are the census
I
charts?
think they
Most
of them
compiled
are
these charts
census
from
charts that they
census
pull
numbers
off.
that they,
They gathered it and they inputted it, and then
Yeah,
this is
right.
what they
Yeah,
This is
but
the
the numbers
output.
probably, the raw numbers probably came directly from the US Census
Yeah.
Bureau.
All right. All right, so I'm going through 31, I'm on 33, still some old data for 15. Got some education and employment data. And then summary and conclusions, so
Yeah, the
we're
one-
making some summary and
Just a
conclusions on
comment
2015 data.
33, by the way, this is,
Yeah, go ahead.
this is where I'm looking at, and if you take a look at 2010 versus 2015, one of the things that I noticed here is you do see a trend where in general people are falling more in the lower income brackets in 2015 than they did in 2010. So 2010, we had more people making more money, and in 2015, we have more people making less money in our community. So average income's going down. I don't think that's a healthy sign for our community, but it
No.
is, it does show that trend in this. I just want to point
We
that
gotta
out.
make sure that we stay on top of blight so we can attract and keep our house values and attract people that have the income.
But
to-
then,
And I think that's another reason why we need to also think about when the content of the plan is, what in this plan is going to create those things that will be attractive. We mentioned things like parks, recreation, community facilities. There's a lot of things going in that. So I think that's another thing that we tried to put into from the Plan Commission, and we as a council really need to think hard about that, is what do we want to put in this plan to make sure that we make it an attractive community in the future?
And I think, we need to hold landlords accountable on the rental properties too, sometimes.
Absolutely.
So that's why I was asking for the rental properties. I'd like to investigate into a rental program. But you need to have the information first, so
But
you
it-
can hold them accountable and clean it up.
I totally agree. But as the population ages, they're gonna retire, and that's where your income's gonna fall. So you can't
Right.
pick older people out just
Oh,
because
not
they wanna
saying anything
retire.
about
right?
kicking old
Oh, no,
people
no.
out.
But my point is,
But you want
that's
to bring in
where,
those young people with making lots of money too, because they pay more taxes and help us be able to pay for all the amenities that we have for our community.
that's
If
where
the income
community
keeps going down
senior
and house
center
values
needs
go
to be.
down, then
Right.
we have less income to work with.
We have to make our neighborhoods attractive.
All right, 34, it's got education and employment data, and then you got summary and conclusions based off 2015 data.
Just real quick, I just want to make a note on 35 where it says 35.7% of all housing units are occupied by renters.
It's interesting. It's-
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm really interested to see the rental properties, because I think that there's a good opportunity there for the village to focus in and check those things out.
That also means
Where
that
did-
some
where did
homes
you
that
see
maybe
that?
were
It's
previously
Yeah,
single-family
I think
owned
it's
are
on page
now
35.
being
Page
turned.
35
into
upper right.
residential.
True.
Under housing.
then the
Oh,
six-
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Second bullet down. Yeah, that's a big number.
And then the 6.1 of all housing units are vacant. Now, this was as of 2000, I'm assuming it's 2015, so I'm not sure how much of that's changed. But again, I think it's an opportunity for us to make sure that we're on track with that. Does
So that-
Emily comment?
Like rental ordinances, that type of thing,
Yeah.
maybe we open those ordinances on
I was
rental
gonna bring that up
properties
before.
and-
Yeah, I have a program that we could kind of mimic.
Yeah, that's a good catch.
Yeah, big number.
Okay, moving on, existing land uses. There's some 2017 data there.
Ooh. Good.
Yeah, and that one might, there probably is more current statistics out there for that sort of stuff. The population stuff just from the census is kind of what the census Bureau can provide.
All right.
Something interesting, even in the land use where it says recreation and conservation, that's not a bad percentage, 8.6 for recreation. I think that falls in the guideline, to my memory
Yeah.
of health.
And I know it doesn't state it anywhere in here, but if you take a look at the, there's a map somewhere that shows the type of lands, and there's a lot of areas that are like wetland and not suitable for development. So that 11% vacant, I think a lot of the vacant land is because much of it is not suitable for development too.
Maybe we could subdivide that to identify that, of that piece of that pie, how much is, suitable and how much is not? What do you think
Well,
about that?
I know we mentioned that, but I think we said, well, if you take a look at the actual existing conditions map, or the existing land use map here coming up,
So-
I think that does have, the vacant land. If you take a look at where the vacant land is located in the gray, you see that is a lot of the, like along the creek, and we know that those are wetland areas around the lakes and creek and stuff like that.
I know with this map saying existing land use,
So are we on the map now then?
yeah,
Okay.
sorry. That's, yeah, it's like page, I think it's 39. But I would expect, and I mean, existing means where we're at today, correct? So there is a plot of land there that we designated the Ortonville Wildlife Preservation Park, and it's listed as recreation conservation. Certainly it's conservation, but if we have an ordinance already for existing land use, it should state what it is in the ordinance now, which is Wildlife Preservation Park, right?
That's the title of what we gave it, but the actual land use is recreation and conservation. That's, because these are the land use categories, that's
So
what
that falls
category
under
falls into.
conservation then?
Yes.
Right.
All right. Oakland County's got a nice little dotted natural areas assessment map. That's
Where are we up to now?
Yeah, yeah.
following the existing map, so
42?
it's like the roughly
42, yeah.
Oh, natural
The new
features
42,
section.
okay.
yeah.
New 42.
Okay, yeah, here's the one that shows the wetland areas, which
That's a
largely
43.
lines up with the vacant land.
Well, we got the new map right here, Mark, 42, and then but we're also very.
Yeah, park and trail system, that's the new 42 there.
So the difference there is there are much less trails here that Oakland County is now designated for trails. So that's the difference between the old one.
What was that, Larry?
That was one of the things that we brought up with McKenna. We said, hey, look, this is dated, I don't really know the date on it.
2009.
Yeah, June 1, 2010 is what this one. And I said, well, wait a minute. Oakland County must have updated this since 2010.
So if you look at
And this
what,
is what we got from McKenna after we pressed them for it.
if you kind of look at what they've done, it's those that were developed between 2009 and say 15 or something. Their focus is on connecting those trails that are already complete, like through Pontiac and through Walled Lake, and there is absolutely nothing in Brandon Township. or-
Right, because they're bypassing us.
Yeah.
I didn't turn that.
Right.
So there is a statement in 41, so 40 is the new updated Oakland County, and we're talking Oakland County trails. Are these existing trails today, Larry? These
Yeah,
are existing?
they're the
They're not
purple ones.
conceptual or anything?
The purple ones are existing ones, and the yellow ones are the
Proposed.
connectors that they're proposing to develop.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, where's the purple?
This is on the new map.
Yeah, right
The
here.
purple and then the yellow ones.
Yep, you see those?
Those are the existing ones, and then the yellow ones are the ones that they're proposing.
Oh, you're calling that purple? Okay,
Yeah.
What are you
alright.
calling it?
Like red?
It's almost like a
So that's what I'm like, I'm looking, I'm thinking, where's purple? Okay.
Plum, let's call it plum.
Well, no,
That's
that's okay, I was just
Larry.
like, I'm thinking, what am I missing? Your color's a
You ever
little
heard that old
bolder.
expression, the fly poop out of the pepper?
No,
Hey,
Remember,
we're
we're being
reminded the
recorded.
camera is running.
don't really.
Moving on.
I didn't use the S word. I cleaned it up.
Is this is the page 41 an Oakland County statement, or is this coming from our master plan development here? Where it talks about the North County Trail Loop connecting up with the village of Ortonville?
That should be, we were waiting to see the map. The new map we just got.
Right.
So there was comments among them that once we do that,
We
so
strike.
So we,
I would strike it.
yeah, it doesn't
Which is that, the
apply.
North County Trail Loop?
That
thing?
whole North County Trail Loop thing.
Yeah, I agree. That was, we actually raised that, we said, we'll leave it in for now until it can be confirmed whether or not it's there. So if it's not
It's
there,
gone.
it should be stricken.
Okay.
On page 41, elementary can be lowercase,
Where's that?
Parks and Rec, second line, and intermediate We're just identifying, we're not giving the name of an intermediate, it's just a
Okay, so
An
intermediate
adjective.
also should be
intermediate.
lowercase then,
Mhm.
yeah.
And throughout the document, village, unless we're actually saying Ortonville Village or the village of Ortonville, village is lowercase, so rather than go through and say that all of it, they just need to make that change, do a search and replace, a find and replace.
I'm looking at the, under priority natural areas, in the third paragraph, it says what we don't have, but it doesn't say there is a priority two there. So large upland forest, because we do have priority two
Yeah, it says.
wetlands, so okay, I got it
What
underlined.
is he looking
All right,
The village does
Oh.
not contain any priority one or priority three. The large upland forest land or wetland complex is a priority two natural area.
all right. Did anybody have any questions on those? With the updated,
Just a quick question though, and not to harp on this, but when we use the term "the village,"
at? Referring,
that should be capitalized.
I think
because we're
it's so,
referring to,
yes.
Because it's
the.
We're
taking the
referring
place of
to
Ortonville.
The village.
Right,
Is
but-
So, and when you're saying do the search, if it's not saying
They'd have to look, they would have to
the
look at that.
village, then you follow
I
me?
agree.
If
Yeah,
they found
right, 'cause we're
village on,
referring- 'cause-
like
Because it's like
300
the
times, they'd have to
mill.
look at every single
Yeah.
instance and see, is this one capitalized because it's
Right.
referring to the village, or is it capitalized when it should just be a village, you know, talking about in general?
In general, but it's, what I'm saying, there's a lot of overusage of
Yep.
of the capitalizations is, you know, people need to go to grammar school for
A
something.
guy wrote it.
You don't want to work with a German company because they capitalize lots of stuff that we probably wouldn't.
Doesn't make it right.
I use more correction.
Yeah, you know what I mean, man.
Okay.
Especially when we talk about that.
The next map is following page 41. It has the natural features.
Yeah.
This is what
That's the
shows
one I
the
was thinking
natural,
about
it
before,
shows the
where I said-
priority two.
They have all of the wetlands are primarily where much of the vacant areas are.
Where do we have future recreational opportunity?
Creek preserve areas, flood zones. Hey, my backyard's a flood zone. How nice.
But that's also wetlands there too, so I don't know why they call it a flood zone as opposed to a wetland. Wetland, emergent forest and scrub, they don't show any water, but there is water back there. Lots of it. You see that? It says creek preservation areas, flood zone, those areas along the creek are wetlands there. You can barely see the dots up inside the green lines.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't we call those, I think they weren't they designated class 2 wetlands,
This is just designating the
natural features?
type of areas and natural features.
So what does priority 2 mean? It's an
We have
Oakland
to
County
contact the
designation.
national,
It's an Oakland County designation,
oh,
right?
Oakland County designation?
Yeah.
Or was it a,
No?
I thought that was a state.
I thought it was Oakland County.
Source Oakland County.
The source of that is Oakland County. Where was the state? Oh, it's on, this page. Okay, county natural areas. So I guess that is a county designation. Okay.
Does anybody have any questions on the natural features map?
Do we need to modify any of this where it has the park features desired, since we kind of modified there as far as like a gazebo? Do we just leave them there with the little peak?
Which
Dots.
map are you looking at?
The recreational opportunity map, where it has the park features desired.
well,
Oh,
it's
next
a
one,
different
there.
map.
Oh.
Yeah, we were still on.
Yeah.
Oh, all right,
Are we moving on to the next
Now,
one?
Okay.
now we're good.
all right.
All right.
Go ahead, Colleen.
I just thought Bill had another copy of a map that was older than mine,
Uh,
so.
This says park features desired. These dots were compiled from the open session that they held to get the open house they had for community input. And I think this was the community came in and put dots where they wanted to see stuff. So those dots that you see here, it's not something that we as the planning commission chose. This is what the community input was. That's what this is.
Was that our workshop at the high school, that, where the council and the
Yes.
planning commission members?
Well, no,
And there was
not
like
that one. This is when the public was invited to come in, and they had maps like this and they had a lot of different
If
activities.
that was the case, that'd be
I think
great
that
if it was
the library,
identified
yeah.
as that, so we would know where this came from, because otherwise it's saying the source came from
It
Oakland
says
County.
park features desired, and we could maybe add park features desired from community.
I mean, I
input
just
or
think it should be
something.
linked, just so we know, because otherwise it appears that it's from Oakland County, and I want to be sure, not just, Larry, that you're, that's what I want to know that that's for sure, not just a hunch that you have,
Well, this isn't
that's
from
fact.
Oakland County. This is McKenna compiled this. It states right on.
Right, but it says the,
Map.
base.
Base map source Oakland County. So it's the base map.
It's very
Okay.
But the
All right,
dots
so-
on it were just, are.
I would just like to label, if you know that for a fact, that that's true information, that it's identified that this was community involvement.
Yes,
specified.
that was, because we asked that question, what was that, and they said, well, this is the result of where people will put the dots for what they wanted to see.
But these dots go against the natural preservation park.
Right, that's,
This is saying, this is
Ordinance now.
what the people desired. We had the open house, people came in, we said, what would you like to see happen with the natural preserve area? And this is what people chose to put in the natural
I
preserve
I
area.
know,
You know what
I
I'm
know
saying
that, but
about
we're,
lately?
we're talking about us, what we choose too, right, Larry?
This is representing
All right,
what the
all right.
community
So I
showed.
get it.
Okay,
I understand
and
how-
I just want it labeled of what this, who came up with this is
Yeah,
all.
just to be clear, Dan, you were the one who said right up front that no one person should make the decision for the whole community, and I agree with that. And so this is just saying, hey, we asked the community, what would you like? This is what they told us. So we're just
Right.
representing this in the master plan, saying this is what the
And-
community
That
said.
works.
So we're gonna add, community input.
Source community input. Okay.
Or community workshop, I guess.
Yeah, so we had it in the town hall, with little stickers.
Yeah. Just so that we can identify where it came from.
You got that note there, Bill?
Yep.
Okay.
So I'd like to, because this goes against the Ortonville ordinance we have right now, to protect it as a wildlife preservation park. And it does, the whole purpose of the Ortonville Wildlife Preservation Park was to leave it natural, for natural undeveloped hiking, to allow the animals to roam at will, to allow the ecosystem to flow and whatnot without any development. That was the whole purpose for council's approving that to be a natural wildlife preservation park, not to go in there and develop it and put signs up and put trails in there and put gazebos in there and put a dog run in there and put, that's what it's saying, building structures. That's what all those dots represent. I would like to propose, all right, and that maybe this is the time where we get that consensus, where we remove these dots and make it accessible for public hiking on undeveloped trails, not to put a dog run in there, cutting trees down, putting fences up, putting gazebos in there.
So Dan,
It
can I
goes
ask a
totally
question
against,
then?
I'm sorry, I'm not done yet.
Okay.
So it goes totally against the ordinance of the Wildlife Preservation Park to protect the whole ecosystem and the free-ranging animals, etc. there. So my proposal to this workshop would be to remove and keep it a wildlife preservation park.
Dan, I would ask a question then. Why do we bother to ask the community what they want if we are just going to go and say, well, they are looking for something that we didn't want when we passed this ordinance, so let's just wipe off the community's input out of our master plan. Because that's essentially what you're doing if you take away what the community said they wanted in that area. You're basically saying, I'm going to take away the community's input in this piece of property here. And I don't think that would be accurately representing what the community asked for.
Excuse me, Larry, but prior, we had an ordinance prior to what the community wanted.
Yes. I understand that.
So we should.
But
go
here's the
with-
thing, is if the community says, we really want to be able to do this, then maybe at some point down the road, we may have to consider, if the community really feels that strongly that there should be something, maybe we need to revisit that ordinance and say, is this really what we need to do? Or we need to, we don't have to do what the community is asking here either. This is just saying the community would like to see these uses in there. That's all it's saying. Whether we do that or not is up to us as a village council and a planning commission.
Well,
As a village
I
council,
think
mostly.
Bill is already noting that it's gonna be specific to what the community
That the
is.
source was
Yeah,
community.
this is the source, the
Recommending
committee
or
was asked,
asking.
what would you like to see
I
done?
think
And this
the
is
word
what they-
community, okay, that's what certain residents that came and put in, but to use the word community.
Or were there certain members that padded the information?
Yeah, because if you take it even further, the community
Because I
would
know-
say they want to turn my house into a brothel.
They could, but it's your house, you don't have to do anything if you don't want to with your
But
house.
still, it's getting to the point where we already know what this area is, what we wanted it for. The community may have an input.
Well, I would then turn around, if I was a community person and I heard that argument, I would ask and say, well, how many community members did you ask about this before you decided to make that preserve? Because I think that many people in the community would say, well, obviously from the surveys, many people weren't even aware of that property and obviously weren't consulted before it was converted to that use. So, I mean, the community could just as easily turn around and say, well, the village council did this without consulting the community.
What was the date of our ordinance that we did for the wildlife preservation?
Just
And what was
last
the
year.
date?
Yes.
I'm not
sure.
Early spring or-
And what
But-
was the date of the community workshop on this?
This was, what's that about?
August, September, something like that.
I was thinking June, July timeframe. Was it later than that? Might
It
have been.
was at the
Mike.
open house. so
And how many community, do you recall how many community
It's
members?
like 50 people.
50 people?
Yeah, it's all the raw data's in the appendices. We can look at
Right.
the raw data too and see.
So-
So in
Just 'cause
essence,
I know
is what you're suggesting that we remove the green dots, right?
In essence, the wildlife is abundant. You've got sandhill cranes, you've got turkeys, you got deer, you got raccoon, you got squirrels. You put a dog run in there, you put up fences, they're not roaming freely anymore in that park. And guess what? You put dogs back there barking and tearing up business, which I've been to many dog parks. My wife walks dogs all the time. It is loud and it's crazy. So the natural preservation of that park would be destroyed to put a dog park in there. It would be an injustice to this community to allow a resident, because they have a dog, they want to put a dog park in there and cut down trees.
I'm not
It's
going to
ridiculous.
disagree with that. Dan.
Well, that's what
not
I'm
gonna
asking to
disagree.
remove.
I'm saying that though, what you're missing my point. I'm not saying that we need to do these
Well,
things
why
because the
don't
community
you
said
let
they'd
me
like to
clarify, why don't you let me clarify with McKenna that in fact was the dots from the community input? And if it was in fact the dots, is there consensus just to say this, or label this such that this was the input from the community? If that wasn't the fact, then the consensus is to remove the green dots, right?
Well, there's gazebos being recommended back there.
No, I don't think that's those dots.
You got
There's-
you got
They
sports
have
fields.
nature or hiking trails,
Nature,
picnic area. That's the brown dots, which are are
Right.
scattered in the park. On the outside edges or perimeters of them is where they might have things like dog park, playground, sports field, park, which is more the outer fringe area.
Yeah, there's 3 inside the outer fringe and 5 or 6 just outside.
Yeah.
those types
Yeah,
of-
about the
But
only
I
kind
mean-
of sports field you could put in there would be a disc golf place, and you would have to
You have to
cut
cut
down a lot
down
of
trees.
trees.
Yeah, and Dan, I think you need to keep in mind that, when it comes down, this is just basically saying this is what we captured from community input. When it comes down to what we actually are looking to do with it, that's when we would come up with our own specific things. Just because the community says they would like to build 8-foot wide paved trails through there, doesn't mean that we have to do that as a council. And I would be opposed to something like that, because I would say, look, I agree 100%, we want to preserve that natural area. But we want to also show the community, hey, yeah, we listen to you, but for these reasons, we are not going to implement a dog run. For these reasons, we're not going to do this or that or the other. Just because the community wants it doesn't mean that we have to do it.
I
We
think,
should listen to the community, and that's what we're doing by showing that, hey, we listened to you, or we heard what you want to say. But when it comes down to it, then we can respond and say, we understand, we listen to what you said, but because of the sense of nature, we don't want to disturb that, so we are not gonna implement some of the things that you guys asked for. That's the way I would probably approach it.
I'm okay with properly labeling it, that if, once it's validated that this indeed was from the community, that it's identified as such, and we don't touch it other than that, because what we're actually gonna be approving is when it gets into the goals and objectives of
That's the
what
more
we're
critical
going
piece.
to
If
allow.
there's goals and objectives that are specific things.
All right, so
But I-
we're gonna
I-
reword this
We're
We're
to
gonna,
say it's.
he's gonna validate with McKenna that that actually was the source. And again, like I said, I know, people come in and pad, so even though there was 50, how many, True.
Well, unfortunately, I wish we could have gotten more response. That's been the most, to be honest, that's been the most frustrating part of this whole process, is we sent out lots of survey things, we only get back, well, we didn't get too bad a response back from survey, but then we have the open houses, we try to get community involvement, and you have like several dozen people show up maybe, and you really don't get as many people as you would like to be able to capture the input.
What are,
So you
what are
gotta
these,
go with what you get.
what are these, all these brown dots strategically placed around, outside the wildlife preservation park? So you got them all.
Hiking trails, or nature hiking trails, or picnic
What are all
areas.
those? Those, it looks like they're strategically planted to where the Oakland County Trail System was proposing.
Well, that green
Are
trails,
those random, are those just random residents out there putting those in there?
I wonder, do they have a picture of the map that was
Again, I wouldn't get hung up on it. You're gonna kill yourself for time, and because rather than assume, why don't we?
All right, we can follow up on that. All right, good. Next page is 48, survey methodology and purposes. I don't know that, oh, this is historic preservation. Then it goes into survey methodology and purpose. Right, 48? Nine right sequence.
Okay.
And then it goes into survey results. And then we have another map that looks like areas for historic buildings map. And I assume that's accurate. You stop me if you guys,
Yeah, just a
Yeah,
general
something.
note, one of the things that the planning commission did change, because much of this was carried forward from the previous plan, is we took off specific business names and replaced it with addresses to make it more generic and more applicable for future too.
get more photos of residents on page 50, or on businesses on page 52, residents, and looks like Ortonville, Old Town Hall there.
Yeah, and all the photos have the overhead lines.
Yeah,
Yeah.
except the picture of your house, Mark.
What happened there? Picture from Larry's driveway.
Then we got one church on here. Falls from 55, 56. Got the barn that's up for sale.
Nope, that's the other barn.
Well, that's the other one.
That's the barn on.
Oh, that's in town there.
That's the one
Yep.
over on.
The ball fields.
Yep.
Yep.
Right by the
It's not
ballpark.
historic.
Yep.
It's hysterical.
And more residential, 57, more residential photos, preservation strategies. Is there anything on that that caught anybody's eye?
I know the DDA does, or I thought the DDA did a lot with the historical stuff because they offered a grant. I remember a couple years ago, Molly had come to council to present what they were going to do to the old town hall, put the old, the more historical, I think they ended up getting they didn't get the grant, or they ended up doing something else with the money. So I have a note here, what happened to the DDA, to the old town hall? And they were gonna do that, I don't know.
Oh, the facade.
The
front
facade, yeah, remember
Yeah.
it was through Oakland County and they were working with it, so is this something that the DDA does and gets grants for? Are we crossing the lines of what they might have, or do they follow our master plan with what we want for the historical?
You
and
do.
the
Maybe
size?
joint.
They're
yeah.
joint.
DDA,
So-
absolutely.
Okay, so,
Now they can do a like they did their facade loan and their sign loans, and they're trying to keep them all you know,
Uniform.
uniform and
So what, does anybody recall what happened to that for the old town hall? Why didn't we get that done?
Yeah, that would have looked really nice.
think
to
that
take
was-
it
It would have
back
been
to
a
its original-
start, and I
Yeah.
think
I think
people would
that was
have gotten
prior
excited.
to me the last time even. I wanna say that thing was like
I don't know. If it goes,
2008 or something.
I don't know if it goes that far back.
I've got a copy of
Yeah.
it somewhere around here that we
Boy,
found.
that would be-
We found,
You got a good memory.
literally, we found the book laying around here just recently, so it's around here somewhere that we're.
Okay, well,
And the rendering looked really nice. I mean, to bring it back to its original state, why
Yeah.
would, is that part of the master plan for a vision of what to bring the?
I don't know if that was one of the specific goals or objectives in the list. I don't recall that specifically, so it may not be in there, but will be, when we go through the goals and objectives, that's where we can see step by step which ones, whether that's in there or not. And if we all think that it's worth putting in there, we can certainly add some additional goals and objectives. One thing to point out is in this preservation strategies, I know we were talking earlier about, hey, how do you combat blight and get people to take care of their homes, but they do have some suggestions about how we could potentially approach that as a village under the preservation strategies.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
mhm.
So some components like that are in the master plan to try to help encourage people to, to keep their houses up and also keep the historical nature of their houses.
Does anybody else have any questions on the page 58 preservation strategies?
Well, I do have a question on the next page.
Okay, the goals and objectives.
Under the downtown development.
Yep.
Item number 5 should be item number 1, and it should be bolded. I mean, encourage new types of businesses that can, strive in our current location. I don't think a lot is going to change. That, to me, so super important, rather than some of the things that are in there, encouraging more unique local activities. That's all good and well, and it sounds good to be written down and read. But the biggest thing is getting people down here that, here's what we've got. If you have a business or a plan that could fit in here, it would make our entire universe a lot better. So
Yeah.
that's really important, and here it's listed. Well, I know it's listed, that's great, but that's very important because this is what we have, so.
Yeah, and actually, we worked on that particular one a little bit because in the process of striking out all the stuff to sewers, that was one of the things as well. We know that that is a main concern about a lot of the types of activities, so that's why we came up with that specific type of wording in there. Businesses, encourage businesses that can thrive in the current downtown environment, because we know that there is no change to that in the foreseeable future. So we wanted to emphasize that point, is they got to be able to thrive in the situation we got now.
And so number 1 is more of the same, basically. That's just what we've always strategized around, right? And it seems like it's still
So-
sputtering and not really
So you
taking
wanna
off.
move number 5 to number 1?
Is this a priority status here?
Or maybe number 2 at least, I
Well,
don't know.
Larry, what do you think? I mean,
I think number 1 is not a bad overall starting objective, and maybe move the number 5 one to number 2 immediately
Okay.
after. What do you think?
Are these
I'm
in
asking-
order of
I'm just throwing this out
importance?
for people to think about.
Are they in order of
They're-
importance?
Well,
It's
not
not in
necessary.
order of priority or importance, it's just a list.
it's
really.
a
But
list,
it should be more of a priority thought. It's more
It-
about a hierarchy of our thought process
Right.
than a priority, but,
When somebody's going through this, you
Yeah.
read down, you read objectives, number
Yeah.
1.
right,
So
right.
the next one would make
Just
sense.
kind of
Yeah,
hierarchy.
so I do think that one should be higher in the list, so it is more emphasized when you're reading down.
Especially if somebody doesn't take the time to read all through 6,
Right.
maybe they'll at least read the first 2 or 3, then that you've already got it there.
Okay, so is position 2 sound okay?
Yeah,
That's
yes,
fine.
sure.
Okay.
All right, 5 to 2, right?
I have a question on 6. As long as they're used only in key locations, and I'd like to know, it's like, okay, key locations, define that. What's a key location? And who's gonna decide that?
Have to be council.
That would
Gonna
be,
do
I mean,
building.
okay,
well, I
so-
mean, if it was a site, it'd probably have to go first to planning commission for site plan review and then to council if there was any, if it needed variances or things like that, it would go to
Okay.
council ultimately.
Okay, so just a key location, like, okay, we just need to keep in mind, yeah, who's gonna define that, who's gonna,
Yeah, but
And
primarily
then
when
the-
it comes to like buildings and structures, that would be primarily the planning commission would review those things, unless it was administrative review. I think did we get that now, the administrative review thing? Yeah, so I mean, if it's minor, then village manager and the building inspector can just review those on their own. But if it's something more significant, it'd probably come to the planning commission for review.
so then the new development in the downtown area should primarily be 2 stories or lower. So new development, so like what sites are we referring to when we're talking about that? What sites are available for
There's
redevelopment?
not a lot of vacant spots, but let's say,
Right.
for example, what if someday the township moves out of that building there, and somebody says, hey, I wanna like tear that down and build like a nice little,
Senior housing.
first floor will be, shops, and the second floor will be like, apartments or something like that. And you could maybe argue that, okay, you could maybe go 3 stories there, so you have 2 stories of apartment flats above a store of shops. That would be maybe something that they might be talking about there. I don't know. We didn't go into details on that, but
Well, I guess, because I guess,
Yeah.
I don't like to have I would prefer not to have objectives in there that may never even, just to put it in there, to have it in there unless we have like an idea of what it could be. So that's why I was wondering, it's like, new development, like,
well, I think the main point there is that we really want to keep it to 2 stories.
mhm.
Because that's what all the historical buildings pretty much are, just 2-story structures or 1-story structures. So if there was a key location where it might be, where it was appropriate, we could maybe consider 3 stories.
that's gonna be
But we're not
subjective.
talking about
A
building
key
a high
location
rise.
is subjective.
Yeah.
The way it reads, though, it implies that somebody has some idea of where some 3-story buildings may be appropriate. So
Otherwise, why use
It's
the
almost like
word
they're implying
key
that they
location?
had an idea what was happening.
Why don't you just leave off just the 2-story, why put it 3 in there?
I think that was only
So
to
we're not
allow the
limiting?
possibility, so we're not limiting ourselves. Like the same reason why we eliminated public is to allow greater flexibility in how we can,
Well, but the way I
The
look at it
uses.
is, in taking your example, if somebody made that building into a 3-story, then you'd have a roof, and it would completely, the people in back, the houses in back, that's all, I mean, that would be a big structure in our little area.
Well,
3-story with a roof.
if it's a flat roof, it wouldn't really impact
It
that. And that
does.
would be a consideration if we're looking at approving. If it's a 3-story with a big peaked roof, then that's something that definitely would have to be reviewed. We might say, no, we won't go for that. I
So
mean,
the goal for downtown development states future development in Ortonville should respect the historic character of the village, and we got down here
Yes.
some 3-story buildings that doesn't really respect the historic nature of our village.
What if someone
3
decided to rebuild the Sprague Hotel over there? The one, the Yandel Hotel that used to be there, that was a 3-story building. Where the cop shop is and stuff,
Yeah,
And they, they're probably gonna be the first to move out, I would think, or,
I will add this perspective because I've been involved with Main Street. I've gone to a lot of Main Street seminars and workshops. I've also, in the past, on the council, gone to some state seminars and workshops and stuff where they talk about things like complete streets. There's a lot of, when you talk about trying to vitalize a community, there's a lot of different approaches and new approaches are coming into on how to make a downtown more thriving, more vibrant and stuff. And some of them, I don't think this would necessarily be appropriate in our community, but, you take a look at some communities and they say, hey, we have a section here where there was this vacant land or there's this old building and we converted it to some townhouses, something like that. And some of those structures might be a little more taller, more modern looking, but in some cases that does help to bring vitality to some of those downtowns. Now, we'd have to, look really hard and close to see if we wanted that type of development. But I think it's just that that sort of thing's in there because of some of these new ideas and new ways that communities are developing their downtowns to try to turn them around and get more people back into town again.
in or out.
I just think it goes against your goal, but that's up to council as to whether you want to leave it in there.
In or out?
What is it currently worded?
Yeah.
About the
Three-story.
three-story.
leave
Some
the
three-story buildings
in or
may be
out?
appropriate.
I'm okay with it, personally.
I would prefer to have it in for the flexibility. It doesn't mean we have to approve it again. It just means that it gives an, that possibility.
In or out?
If it's appropriate, then we could.
Well, I'd say no.
I'm gonna say no also.
I'll go with no. Let's go with that.
Well, it's-
Let's go with that.
I mean, I had my notes all, I mean, initially I'm a no as well, because that was my whole thing, it's like, who's gonna determine that key location? I guess I just don't have enough.
So strike it.
So just strike the some three building,
Some 3 buildings, maybe some.
so we're striking three buildings.
Okay, next page, 61, it's the Main Street, Ortonville. Shows the downtown development boundaries, with the municipal boundaries. That's just a map, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, it is
nothing
what
to
it
talk
is.
There's
about
a lot
there.
of this.
Flip side, we got residential developmental goals. Ortonville will retain its identity as primarily a residential community. So here it gets lists out dog park in number 3. Consider adding amenities excess above, so such as hiking paths. Hiking paths is okay, because it does fall, to me, it falls in line with our wildlife preservation park ordinance, but in biking it's fine if it's but where would you put the dog park other
Well,
than
Dan,
that
I think you
wildlife?
gotta realize that there's a lot more, there's more park areas and village-owned property in the village besides just the
So,
preservation area.
so like
Just
Narren
the,
Park would be a good spot to put a dog park,
Narren
right?
Park could be a good spot.
Yeah.
We have
Or
that
the-
property on the
maybe where
backside of
the,
Narren that you could put something on
Skate
too.
park was.
Where the skate park.
Grind it up.
Yeah.
Well, that maybe splash pad.
Yeah.
I mean, I mentioned
that's-
I
Okay.
mentioned about the ice rink, but,
All right.
well, winter's come and
I get
gone
it.
now,
yeah,
but
it's-
we had the
You're
equipment.
right.
On that
Yeah,
note,
those two.
Year round.
some of the local people have asked, you know, with the fencing and all that, if we could leave that out of, you know, whatever we do with the skate park. I've been approached during my walks and they said, hey, with the fencing that's adjacent and all that, you know, if we could leave the fencing up or whatever, so.
Which fencing are we talking about? The privacy
encloses
fencing
the-
or
Yeah,
the chain link fencing?
Right,
Which
leave
one?
that, they're, right, they're running up along the property
In
side.
between Terry's and
Yeah.
So you're talking about the privacy
Yeah.
fencing?
Yeah, and that.
Yeah,
They-
leave
they
the privacy
just asked
fence
if
up,
we
sure.
could, like,
Don't take
leave
down
that up.
something that's in good order.
Yeah. I mean, if
I'll
we
just-
put
I'll
it different
give
use,
us
the
a-
chain link fencing might come down, but I would, I would agree that we should leave the privacy fencing. That makes it it helps it to respect the residents.
If
Well,
we
there's no
haven't dealt
good
with
reason
a
to
lot-
take it down because it's
Yeah.
not debilitating,
Right.
it's, you know.
I mean, why spend the money to even take it down? It's, okay.
I just, again, just making a comment about 6 where it says new rental and multifamily housing should be provided. Let me think, let me get my thinking, hold on. Residential development will retain its identity. This is new rental.
Yeah,
So-
new rental and multiple family housing.
Should be provided. So I'm a builder and I'm to come in and erect a rental house, new rental,
Where is that?
number 6.
Number 6.
New rental and multifamily housing. So do we want to get into more rental properties when we've got 62%?
37%, almost 38%.
Well, I
Rentals
think
now.
the main point there is that you could take a single family home and convert it into multiple units. I think the main intent here is, hey, it should, you know, any new rental or multiple family housing should try to be done in a way that
So my home right
it-
now, I move out, I go to Florida, I could rent my home. Is that gonna be a new rental? Or are you talking
that
about new
if you
build?
start renting, I think it's either. I think you could convert an existing home or house into a rental property. I think that's what it's saying, it should be
I
provided.
think that when we talked about that, that was around if somebody was developing new, meaning that.
Erecting a new
Meaning,
building, and
the
this is
example
rental.
being if there's an upstairs above, pizza, or the
Papa,
Papa Bella's, you know, and there's probably already an apartment up there, but if we've got places where you can, part of developing a vital downtown is getting people living down there, you know, and so if you take, or the insurance company, for an example, I don't think anybody's living upstairs there,
There was about
Yeah,
that.
we had a
Was there?
rental.
Yeah.
oh, was there?
Yeah,
Bad example then, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the theory. If you got an old building that you're gonna reuse a space, or if you're gonna build something to any new kind of construction, not converting
Don't
your home
build-
to a,
Apartments, if you have like, build it so it appears like a single family home, or you utilize second level space in downtown buildings and stuff, as that is what it's saying. So it's basically saying, if you have rental stuff, try to make it look like it's residential and not.
well, see, and I guess I don't like to read in between it. It's like I'd like it to be clear and concise for the, I don't wanna read into an objective. I'd rather have it spelled out so that there's no second guessing what it means. So if that's what you think it is, can we just put that to words?
More detailed.
Rental and multiple
It-
family housing should be.
You know, for example, you know, what I see, and I've mentioned this to prior village managers, and this goes back to the whole landlord-tenant thing, holding the landlords accountable for their rentals
So we,
in a clean-up place, because some of the places that are being rented in the buildings downtown, I'd like to make sure that there's not junk on the porches, you know, like where you're driving down and you see an old couch on a porch, on a deck, not a deck, on,
so
the
if
loft.
the intent is to keep it looking, keep the community
Neat.
looking the way it is now,
Mhm.
basically same character, then maybe we could add on to that, like, after the end of that, just tack on something like, in order to preserve the residential character of the village. Something like that.
or do you just wanna strike it if it's confusing? Cause these are goals.
These are,
If you're
yeah.
confused by a
And-
Yeah,
goal,
these
Well, like I said, I
It's
don't
not
wanna
an-
read into
more
an objective.
detailed.
it's
I
not
want-
an objective, so.
Then,
Well, then
that's
I-
what
I-
we could ta-
I'd
well,
like
it's
to
the
strike it.
objective here, we could just strike that.
I'd like to
out.
strike it.
I'll vote yes to strike it.
Okay, everybody else good with it?
I have a question on the next section, non-residential development, number 10. It says, consider adopting a housing rehabilitation policy. And anytime you start talking about policy, are you mandating somebody to do something? Is there gonna be an ordinance
Yeah.
that they have to maintain character of the Ortonville? And then how would we do that? So,
A
Or like they
historical
do in
society,
Clarkston or
like
something
a
like that.
true historical society, so you can only paint your houses these colors, they have, the
Yeah.
colors
would
have to be
be, would be
approved.
on historic buildings only, or is it, what
His-
are we designating that policy for?
Yeah. I mean, I know some communities do have, I don't know if they call it housing rehab policy, but I know some do have if you're gonna paint your home, you have to get it approved by this committee.
It's
Right.
usually when you have like a historic district where you have more restrictive guidelines like
Right.
that, in order to make sure that it's painted with
The
colors that would
beautification of
be
it,
historical.
and to bring more charm to the community.
Yeah.
So are we trying to bring charm to the community and maintain our historical and preserve the past and promise the future? So this housing rehab policy, what is that saying?
That's establishing,
A historical-
no, that's well, it could be that, but it's, could be something as broad as, you know, guidelines for anything, certain, you know, like you have subdivisions that have, what's the term I'm looking for?
HOA?
Yeah,
Mhm.
and so it'd be like a village-wide HOA potentially, you know?
Yeah, I would think if there was, if this would apply to like historic buildings, and we wanted to preserve this historic buildings, then I could see that, okay, if you bought a historic building, then if you're gonna do anything, then take it back to its historic state. That would be preserving the historic nature of the Ortonville. But if you're gonna apply this to everybody that wants to paint their house or do whatever they want, then that's a whole different animal.
If you say what's a historic building, if it's anything over 50 years old, then probably most of the houses in the older part of town already qualify.
Well, there'd have to be a designation of sorts, right? I mean, if you're gonna impose this policy, a policy indicates you're gonna tell that homeowner what he or
Right.
she can't do to their
Well,
home.
this is, the objective is consider adopting policy. I suppose it would be, what would we consider that policy to be and contain? I think
Is
we
it
could
just
put our own
Resident,
restrictions or guidelines or stuff into any policy we created to try to help it.
That could be-
households or
what we want to do.
businesses or
That
both?
could be endless though, when you
Mhm.
think about it.
Yeah.
Why don't we strike the whole thing? Why is it there?
I agree.
I mean, it really, considering adopting a housing that, I don't think it has to really be in there, because we're just gonna.
Although it does say just consider, it doesn't say to implement or develop, just says, so we don't, it can stay in there, we don't have to do anything with it, because it's just consider.
Anytime it talks about policy.
You know,
I know,
actually-
if people can misunderstand, I mean, it's like, if it's
Right.
gonna be confusion. I
See,
mean,
actually,
I'm
anything
fine.
that,
See, I
any
think
of
that-
these objectives that start with consider, I would
We
say,
don't have
we
to-
should make them more specific, is to consider says, okay, I'm
We
thinking
did
about
consider it, and we didn't like it, we decided, well,
I'd
because
rather
really
have
we
it
could
be a
be
little
doing
more
that just, we
substantive.
just did consider it. We did just consider it, and then we're, you know,
Yeah, exactly, okay, we considered it.
See, those
We
last,
just,
those
you know.
last two though, I think those last two may be misplaced, because when you read the goal is non-residential development, so.
and then they're
what is-
talking new residential development.
And
Yeah.
then considering housing rehab, so those two, if
Good
anything,
point.
should have been moved up to the other section.
The residential
The
development.
residential developed section.
Okay, so now take
Yeah,
off
really,
from
why is
McKenna,
that one down?
Well, we took
so you
6
could
off
probably
up
deduct
there.
something from McKenna for that, right?
Yeah, you bet.
So are we proposing to move
Next
9 and
contract,
10
I'll
up
make
to,
sure we can.
Up in place of 6,
6 and 7?
When we're changing.
So move
grant.
them up to 9 and 10, up to 6 and 7,
Yeah.
or are you striking 10?
They're just, consider and should be and.
There's other considers in there too.
You know, I have a question. If we take 9 and move that up into residential development, and we change 10 instead of a housing rehabilitation policy, I mean, if we change that to make it more specific to like the non-residential type stuff, then I think maybe that would be something that we could, I would be more in favor of having some kind of a rehabilitation policy as it pertains to the businesses and the business storefronts and things, because then we might have a little bit more control to say, hey, look, you're a business, you want to operate in a community, we do want you to conform to certain appearance standards and things like that.
So
to be
you're saying
consistent
strike
with our-
housing and put business rehabilitation policy?
Or,
Or just rehab policy.
yeah, you could leave it down there and make it 9.
Yeah,
And
leave it as
strike
9
housing.
and strike housing, and move 9 up into, in place of 6 above. Because I think that might be something that we may want to consider and might be appropriate for business.
All right, so I got striking housing, right? And then moving 9 up to
Mhm.
6 above.
Right.
Okay, the
I
next
just,
page. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
number 2, do we want to, where it says, okay, improve traffic safety along M15, especially south of Grange Hall / Mill, and at the intersection of South Street, and the intersection with Granger
Number 2
Road.
where?
Number 2, under the non-residential, do we want to put South Street / M15, and then Granger Road / M15? Improve traffic safety along, I mean,
Because it already says M15 up top.
okay, but then when we're getting, especially okay, yeah.
Yeah, they're talking about
Yep, all right.
M15 in general, yeah. And they're just identifying the 3 intersection points.
Okay, and then, provide, number 3, provide flexible zoning mechanisms for property owners and tenants. Why would we give the tenants any, zoning, that would all be the property owner, it wouldn't be the tenant.
That's correct.
Strike in tenants.
True, that is correct. Because tenants really can't do anything on the property without the
Exactly.
owner's consent.
Exactly. number 5, concentrate commercial development along M15 at nodes as opposed to strip along the entire length of the corridor. That's making an assumption that we're going to, because otherwise that's going to be a lot of stops, right? People are going to be stopping at each little store along the way. That's assuming that we could get any road expansion, right?
No, when they're talking about the nodes, what they're talking about doing is, instead of having multiple across M15, you have entry points, like for an example, you would enter at the Ford dealership and there would be like a service drive or something to where you would
Like
access,
it is now there, yeah.
yeah, several different businesses versus,
Just like an easy off.
you'd get off, you'd get into the node and there might be 5 businesses in there, you know, different, like you'd have a strip mall here and this. you know.
I know they got
So-
that like on Woodward too, where you've
Yeah.
got like a curb and then you get
You get in
off
there.
here and then there's like a whole bunch of, it's almost
Yeah.
continuous businesses, but you have
Okay.
certain points where you can get over and then you can drive slow, get
Okay.
your parking stuff and you're not obstructing
Okay.
or in the way of the main flow of the traffic.
And that's something that, like, M15 and M24, they're trying to control the curb cuts to have less people
Yeah.
turning off there, turn
Okay.
in one location and then go to all these different businesses, you know.
Okay.
I'm looking at connect businesses with bicycle paths. Why wouldn't it just be connect businesses with accessible pedestrian
Walkways.
as opposed to riding bikes up the bit? I mean, you're connecting businesses with the pedestrian.
There's a push right now to get people to
Exercise?
use bicycles. Put it bluntly, I mean, and there's like.
Those bigger
grants.
communities have those bikes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're starting to issue grants for stuff like bicycle racks and just, you know, just all sorts of different things. So part of what you want in your master plan is some specific bicycle language
Yeah, and
We don't
that's a
even
good
have-
to
point.
apply for
because-
those grants.
Do any of the businesses have any bicycle racks?
The
I don't think
The
they're.
library is what.
library
Okay.
has one, and there used to be one. When I was here the last time, there was one out front
There
of
was one out
the,
here.
right out front of the
Yeah,
party
wonder what happened
store,
to
the
that?
little party
Well, there
store.
was one right out here. Wonder what happened to that? I wonder who gave permission to move that, right?
Yeah, but that is a good point because I know that there were certain things that we questioned in there. Why is it set like this or that or stated this way or that way? And the answer was, well, if you don't have some of this type of thing in your master plan, then it makes it much more difficult to get certain types of grants. So some things are in there for the purpose of.
Strategically.
Right.
Yeah, strategically to enable us to apply for certain types of grants and things. Whether we actually choose to do that or use those grants, we may decide that the restrictions on the grants would make it like not desirable for our community. Like for example, I brought up about on sidewalks because they're saying there's a statement about 5-foot wide sidewalks. I said, why 5 foot wide? That seems kind of big for going down James Street. And they said, well, you know, to get grants and stuff, you have to have something like that because that's what the recommendations
ADA
are.
accessible.
And I said, okay, well, we can leave that in there, but I think then we can use it as a case-by-case basis when we come down to, is it appropriate to put a 5-foot sidewalk? If not, then maybe we do it with our own money and we do a 3-foot wide sidewalk, because that's what's really,
Spend it if we
Really
have the
need it.
grant money available. If we don't.
Well, I gotta tell you, I know people in wheelchairs that wheelchair the community, and I gotta tell you, a 3-foot wide
well,
sidewalk is not
to be honest, I
appropriate
think
for them.
4-foot wide is more appropriate, but, you know, I mean, I would be fine with 4-foot, but 5-foot, if you had 5-foot wide sidewalks on both sides of
We're
the
so
street.
limited as it
It's like,
is.
how do
Yeah.
you fit those in?
Yeah, I think it depends on where the sidewalk you're talking,
Yeah,
what the location.
but I think
you're talking
4-foot wide is probably a good width for most of our sidewalks in our community. Now, on the main thoroughfares, maybe 5-foot would
about.
be good.
Granger, Oakwood, those would
Yeah,
need
and-
to be wide.
Yeah, and in those cases, then it does give us, because we got the language in here, it does give us the opportunity to apply for grants for those types of upgrades. We have a 3-foot, we want to go to 5-foot.
Oh, we passed our
Eric.
hard stop. Or, you know, 8
Are we gonna get done in 20 minutes? Is the
I
question.
would say,
You
let's
can get
finish
it-
up with this
No, you're
section
close.
and then take on,
Stop at
starting at mobility
mobility.
point,
Yeah.
the next session. What do you guys think?
Finish up this.
Alright.
Okay.
So the next section, are you gonna, in walkability, you gonna dump number 4, since it's, there's no plans for
I crossed that out.
Oakland County?
Well, wait a
Correct.
minute,
link the village to Holly Ortonville recreational
To existing and
areas.
proposed recreation
Link-
areas
there are none.
in the village, such as Narren Park.
No, number 4.
Oh, number 4.
Link
yeah,
the village
that
to
one.
Holly Ortonville rec, there's no plans.
Right.
Yeah, because they kicked that out and said that's not longer in the Oakland County plan, so.
So where would we identify these non-motorized trails to go? Because if the intent is for the non-motorized trails to go into the wildlife
No.
conservation
No,
park, then
typically what they're used for is, you can get, and one example might be, you could get, when and if we decide to redo Church Street, for an example, they may give you money on a grant to put a bike lane in there, so that you would widen the road and redo the road, and you'd have like a bike lane in there that would take you as part of your safe routes to school programs
Yeah.
or whatever, in addition to where you get grant money to redo a road to insert a bike lane, you know.
And I think that could also possibly be like along Oakwood Road in order to connect up from the park over to areas.
that's a
east and west of
sidewalk
there.
though, it's not a trail.
Well, no, but you
Well,
could
bike
theoretically put a bike lane, if you could get Oakland County to buy, that wouldn't be ours, but I mean, we could solicit them to put a bike lane in there to go from Brandon Hills, in addition to the sidewalk. Put a bike lane in on Oakwood from Brandon Hills down to Beekys.
So why wouldn't we put bike lanes on there then?
I have bike lanes, I added.
Well, I think non-motorized trails covers any uses other than motor vehicles, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
But the
And I mean,
word
a
trail
sidewalk
implies,
technically could
the
could
word
be a
in
trail.
trail
I mean,
implies
trail
cutting a
could be
trail,
used.
not a bike path on the street.
Yeah, well, this is where it gets, in my
you could
opinion, I
call
think
it
it's.
non-motorized paths, change it from trails to
Yeah,
paths.
see, and this is where I get frustrated because, you know, when people talk about trails, they think about one thing, but, you know, trail really has, it could be anything like this,
Your
a
path.
foot wide dirt path, all the way up to a 6 foot wide paved asphalt walkway.
A footpath would be very narrow. A trail is much wider.
Yeah, but
You
I'm
know
saying
it.
a
18
trail
lanes.
technically, if you go to state parks and recreationals, they have trail maps and they have different levels of trails. So there's your unimproved trail, which is basically your footpath through the dirt. You have, you have trails that are not necessarily ADA accessible,
where
which
would-
are.
So why would
nearly
you
usable.
take the
I
word
think
trails out and replace it with non-motorized
Pathways?
lanes and paths, or pathways? Covers both lanes and, yeah, that's a good one. Pathways would cover both lanes and, is that okay? Cause that takes in bike trails, walking trails, or walking paths.
Yeah, I think that would be one thing I prefer is if we get away from trail, because everybody thinks a trail is this big 5 or 6 foot wide paved thing, and that's not what we want through our community. We know that.
No,
So
this
I
is-
think we use a term that eliminates that negative connotation, this big
stereotype.
wide pavement piece, then it might be something that is more accurate to what we really are looking for.
So like what about number 3, where it's connect Ortonville to the regional pathway system? I
Yeah, that
suggest
one
strike
I
might
think
that.
you
That
should,
should be
I think you
omitted.
should maybe strike it from, there is an advantage of saying attend and support regional greenway meeting sessions, workshops to establish and maintain good relationship in adjacent communities and regional agencies, period.
Yeah, I
It's
would
kind of like they're
probably
putting
keep it
2
here.
thoughts into that. It really
Yeah.
doesn't, I mean, to connect to the regional pathway system compared to attend and support greenway meetings and sessions.
And I think I would agree with that. If we strike just that last piece out
To
of
connect with
there,
Ortonville
because
Regional, because what
that
you
has
may
changed
wanna,
since we got the updated map.
example, even though it's walkability, example is SISMA. You know, attending, because it doesn't do a heck of a lot of good to put a pathway along the creek if you can't get to the creek because of the Frey-Mineys.
Yeah.
You know,
And
so-
for that matter, even if we're not going to link into regional pathways and things, I mean, there is a possibility that within Brandon Township, we're close enough to the Ortonville State Recreation Area, that we could potentially develop some kind of walkability plan to get access for residents, non-motorized, up into that area, because it's only, what, a mile north of us?
Well,
Yeah, it sounds like it.
From Oakwood down Sand Road, it's a half mile.
Yeah, it's not
And you
that
could
far.
Go right onto a trail
Yeah, so I mean, there are some local resources within Brandon Township we could easily connect to that wouldn't involve major trails. And we would probably want to stay in good relationship with those surrounding communities in case they ever have plans to develop some.
So we're good to put a period after agencies?
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
So then number 5, provide sidewalks or trails to existing proposed recreation areas in the village such as Narren Park and other park features along the creek.
Change trails to pathways again.
So we're talking of any trail that goes along the creek would be part of the Ortonville Preservation Park,
Yeah, but would we, well, the creek is not more than just the Ortonville Preservation.
not in the village.
Yeah, it is.
The creek?
The preservation park is that one piece of property.
That the
Up
creek
on the
runs
hill.
through.
The
Where
creek
the
runs
wetland-
through there, runs through a long area, a lot of places in the
But you may wanna do like a little canoe thing from the old mill to Norton Park.
And
right?
actually, does
Is
the
the
creek
water even
actually
deep
go,
enough for
well,
that?
it borders along one edge.
Is it even deep enough to put a canoe in?
That's private property.
I don't think
I
so.
know, a lot of that's,
Yeah.
but
Private way.
technically,
Not the creek.
on the waterway, there is a easement along either side of the public waterway. The public has a right to access that waterway, so. I
Not
mean,
from private property.
No.
No.
Not from private property.
But they
Not
could
without
access,
property
they
owner's
could
permission,
access it from our
That's
park and get off at our other park.
Yeah,
Not to mention, that's one of that's a trout stream. I mean, it's,
yeah.
why?
Class
touch
1
it?
designation trout stream.
Yeah. There's not many in the state.
How deep is
Well,
it?
again,
How
I
deep
think
are?
when we talk about trails, I think I prefer to replace that with
Pathway.
pathways. Because, there's a lot of natural rivers, creeks, I mean, look at the Paint Creek Trail and stuff. There's a lot of trails that are not, okay, that's a big one, but there's a lot of natural trails that are much smaller, may just be wood chips on a 2-foot wide walking area. And those can run quite
Yeah.
well along natural areas and stuff without disturbing the, existing
Yeah,
nature
but-
of the waterway itself.
You've got to cut trees down. They tried doing it right over here, right off of Church Street there, right at the dead end by the post office. DPW started cutting the trail right through there, and make no mistake about it, that was a trailhead right there. And that was wrong.
Yeah,
I don't know
because it was
whatever-
never brought to council to do that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then guess what? The DNR got
Where was
involved
that
with
at?
it, and they shut it right down.
Kitty corner from the post office, right there.
Oh, yeah,
Right
yeah.
here.
One of the
I don't know
entrances.
Where
why,
the dog park is.
what instigated them to do that.
The 1%
Yeah, I don't know.
By the
I
gazebo
still
going
hear
on?
about that.
Multiple people.
It's by the
dog
gazebo.
park.
That was a new path to the gazebo that would access the dog run?
Unknown
And
to
a picnic
council.
area.
Troublemaker.
No, I mean, all kidding aside, there's some
Yeah.
sneaky going on, but I'd like to, on number 5, I'd like to admit in other park features, areas along the creek. As long as, if other private property owners want to do that, that's fine. But as it relates to where the creek runs through the national, or the Ortonville Preservation Park, I think we need to
Well, I
strike
think
that.
if we already have our rules set for the preservation park and it's not permitted, that would by default exclude activities that might be considered in this statement, because
Our
basically
ordinance
it's
would
a.
trump this?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so then if that's the case, then let's define it and say not to include Ortonville Preservation Park property.
Do we need to write that in specifically?
Yeah, because you have to,
What does everybody else think? I heard Dan's view.
Yeah, I totally liked it. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a few extra words and it's specific and it doesn't allow anybody to.
So, help me.
so we're gonna leave everything the way it is, and we're
You're
gonna
awful quiet there.
put, not,
Changing
Not
trails
to-
to pathways, right?
Yep.
right, keep everything in there, and it says not to include Ortonville Preservation, Wildlife Preservation Park.
include Ortonville Wildlife.
OWPP.
Time I hear that, I think of the old rap song though. I'm not coach.
All right.
That's what they do up in Lapeer.
That's right.
So they're going on to the community facilities and infrastructure. There are no sidewalks along the creek. So it says, number one, objective to replace aging infrastructure necessaries such as sidewalks and
And the
drains along
drains
the
along
creek.
The
We're
drains
talking
along
about the
the
drains
creek.
along the creek.
Why does it say sidewalks?
They're saying aging infrastructure such as sidewalks, that's one item, and drains along the creek, that's the second item. They're two separate items. They're not talking about sidewalks.
No
along the
sidewalks
creek.
along the creek, the drains.
They're talking about sidewalks, one item, and drains along the creek, item two.
So the drain behind Wayne Will's house where he wants the trail that go through there, is that where we're talking about?
No, we're talking more along the lines of the one that we talked about before is like where down before we get to your guy's house by Cedar, where the old mini ponds or the minnow ponds and stuff where that drain's blocked up and
The Duck Creek thing?
no, right down here, right down on Mill Street, right when you get to Cedar Street behind the medical processing.
Oh, that
building.
little
Oh,
pond right
yeah.
there.
Yeah, where
That's
it's
small.
not supposed to be a pond. That's,
Yeah.
But there's no creek there, right?
it drains into the creek, that's what that's
Oh.
saying. So it's the drains that go into the creek, some of those drains.
That's
are in
where the
fact-
water's getting contaminated, because there's a lot of geese that hang out in that
Oh,
little
yeah.
pond.
So what was the purpose of that thing? I mean, I
What?
thought maybe it was ice skating rink at one time, but,
Mini ponds, minnow ponds.
oh,
Those two brick structures, they used to sell bait out of there.
And there's
Oh.
water naturally flowing out
And
of
there's
those right
water
now.
with that big, I think is it a willow tree, I think, that's in the middle there, but that drain has collapsed somewhere. That's the drain that, before I got here, they lost the,
camera.
phone, you know,
the
telescoping.
actual cutter is what they lost. They found the camera, but they've got that drain is collapsed and no longer serviceable. There's several more in the village that,
Yeah, so we're talking like storm
Alright.
drains.
so some of those you gotta accumulate and fix because they're sitting there soaking up sewer juice
There
or,
used to be a really big lake trout in there, in one of those.
in all those
minnows.
ponds.
Yeah, for years.
And I would just suggest either define the creek or just lower case.
One thing I'd like to, us to
Number one.
consider, and it's not in here, but I know we're going after money to improve the concession stand at the
Mhm.
ballpark, but wouldn't you wanna put that from a community facility infrastructure to improve that, or wouldn't that go in there? Because we don't have the money yet.
Which number?
I'm suggesting we add it, would it be
Yeah,
appropriate to
objectives.
add a number 6 to
I
include
think
the,
you put that in your objectives.
Yeah.
That's what he's
that
saying.
is
He's talking about
Oh, that's
adding.
right.
on 63 at the bottom.
Yep.
We
Okay.
have 5 more minutes, Bill.
so we're adding, the upgrade and the, renovation of the ballpark concession stand.
Yep.
And then number 5, do we want to insert promote the proper care and maintenance of residential septic systems? Or do we want to say all? I mean, only,
I would say all,
Yeah, it's,
or just maintenance of, just leave it then?
yeah.
yeah. You know, my thoughts, I've expressed this before the planning commission, but my thoughts is that just because we said we don't want sewers in the community doesn't mean that there aren't aging and failing septic systems. And I think that If at some point in the future the state does eventually come down and mandate something, I think it would be better if we showed that we were at least trying to be proactive about trying to promote good
Right.
care of these systems rather than just have the state come in and we're just doing nothing. Because if we at least show we're doing something to try to mitigate the issue, then it might buy
Well,
us
that's why
some
we
goodwill
did
with the
that,
state.
that, we got that discount for the
Yeah,
sewer
so it might
for
buy us some
the-
goodwill with the
Yeah,
state
but-
to show that we're trying to do
It's
something.
everybody being responsible and doing something with it. That's,
Well, right, but maybe we
Yeah.
also
You
took that
can
initiative, we
promote
took
all
that
you
step.
want, yeah, you
We
can
took
promote, that's
That
why
doesn't
we
mean
did.
Right,
anything
we-
unless you have an ordinance.
And we have it
though.
done,
You can't.
I know.
right, we,
And that's
we,
where,
Being
You can't
that
have an
it's-
ordinance, or you
no, the
can't.
state empowered the operation of septic system lies with the county government. So the county government has
when the
been
county comes in,
impaired,
if and when.
powered by the state. You can't even make an ordinance that says, you know, you're requiring people, this is how you operate. And that's how I had checked with, all the way up to the guy who's the head sewer guy at Oakland County.
Yeah, because I know. at
Because
one
the only
point there was
ordinance
something
right
being
now
kicked
in
around
Oakland
for-
County that people have is one of the, I believe Bloomfield has put one in that requires as part of their building and purchase process, is they require a sewer or a septic inspection at the time of sale. And that's been the only one in the county that's been successful. And they think that somebody may challenge that eventually, because it's not a state or county driven initiative.
the scary part is somebody who's not servicing their own. With some of these lots, they're so small that they're going to contaminate
Correct.
their neighbors, and that's not fair to them
So you gotta-
when they're being responsible.
You gotta report them.
Yeah.
And then you look at like
That's,
someplace like my backyard, you get farther place in my backyard this time of year and we get like rain, and it's literally just one pond goes to the next and into the creek. And
Yep.
you know, if you have one homeowner along that stretch there with a failing septic, that can easily flow into that whole system.
Okay, we just want to, we have just like a couple minutes, we want to finish this up, so.
All right, so we're done with page 63.
Okay.
Community image, does anybody have that, anything for that? So, number 4 kind of goes against what we've been talking about in terms of protecting the wildlife preservation park, where we're having canoe and kayaking.
We can't stop people from using a public waterway. This is saying, hey, we got this natural resource.
So
public
this saying,
waterway,
this is
let's
saying
try to
provide an
promote it.
access. You can't stop somebody dropping their kayak in there, but what you're saying is improving it and developing an access to
Yeah,
it.
but that can be as easy as taking the property we have on the one end there in the street here and putting a path that would connect it to the park up on Oakwood there, and maybe along that pathway there could be a bench where people could sit and just watch the ducks in the creek or whatever. I mean that's could be as
So
simple as that.
Yeah, but then it goes right into kayaking and canoeing too, so it assumes that you're providing river access or creek access, right? To dump their canoes or kayaks in, right?
Or you can go to Narren Park and take your canoe.
Exactly, you
Yeah,
can dump it in there.
we
in the park.
have plenty of places
Yeah.
where we could provide access like that that have nothing to do with the preservation of property there.
On number 3, provide flexible zoning mechanisms to encourage the reuse of historic resources while preserving the historic. Can you give me an example of what that means?
Yeah, we had some talk about that too. Could I ask a member of the audience for maybe his take on that particular item?
How many are there? Oh,
Yeah.
yes, John. What's John's last name from McKenna? Our main person.
Anyway, John, yeah.
Anyway, he listed quite a few different examples of encouragements and zoning mechanisms. I don't remember what they are, but he had quite a list of them that were appropriate to our village.
Well, how can we institute something with, I mean,
Well,
Okay.
ask John.
well, all right, since it's not defined of what that is, I suggest we strike that. We can't
Which one
implement
is that?
something
Number
if we can't define
Number
it.
3?
Provide.
I mean, it's like,
This
unless
is-
we
this
get
is
some
an
feedback
objective.
from
The
them.
implementation phase is further down, and that's where we get into more nitty-gritty detailed description.
Sure,
Yeah,
but I mean,
if
it's
we
like you
don't-
have
if we
something we
don't need
can't
it,
interpret.
If we don't need it.
Well, it's
Well,
gotta
I
be
mean-
better defined or something.
Well,
Right,
I
better
got
define
a
it.
question though, is didn't we mention earlier that we want to try to, we said, how do we get people to try to improve their properties, or how do we get people to try to make their properties, you know,
Which
improve
we-
their properties in a way that enhances the character of the village? This is basically saying, hey, we want to find some flexible zoning mechanisms to help encourage that.
Well, zoning,
Now, we'd have to maybe do some investigation to find out what type of flexible zoning options might be appropriate for a community, but I don't think that we should just strike it just because it's, you know, I mean,
Well, then we
that's
need it
where,
further
when we go to
defined.
implement.
Should
Okay.
we,
Or,
send it back
or,
for more-
or why don't we just
Do we
put
want to just
put
pause
a
on
period
this
after
one?
yeah,
historic
why don't
resources?
you wanna pause here?
Do we
And
want
we
to
can
put a pause
say
and
maybe we can get some
continue?
more information on that one?
Okay.
And maybe we can see if we can get those examples.
And which one was that again?
That was
Number
number
Or just
three.
preserve the flexibility,
Yeah.
For a question mark.
historical.
Yeah, because I just want to point out that once we get through these goals and objectives in this area,
so we stop right there.
Yeah.
yeah,
So-
we get into a whole section where we have the specifics.
Do we want to talk about schedules and when we can have this next meeting to keep this flow going? I don't know, Mark, you're the one that travels a lot. Do you have travel schedule next week at all?
I do. Next week I do, but the week, you know, that we're having our meeting, if we could schedule another meeting during that week, I should be okay. But I believe I would be okay, but
So
next week
you're-
I already know I'm.
Week of the 25th,
Yeah, that would be.
and the 63-day clock doesn't start ticking or anything, so we're not
Yeah.
screwing anything up with that.
Well,
So
let's
it's
fresh,
yes.
it's good too.
Yes, the week of the 25th, you know, so if you wanted to do it like, on the Wednesday, or Thursday.
26th, 27th?
I got something going on the Tuesday night, so the 27th would be open for me.
Isn't one of those workshops that Tanya
Or
can
28.
webinar things on one of those nights? And I think there was another workshop I was.
So right there on the calendar, I can look at it.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm
Thanks.
okay with the 28th.
Yeah, I
What
could do
day is that?
27th, 28th.
What's the
That's a
date?
Wednesday or a Thursday.
Is Thursday okay?
28's fine.
28th.
28.
Thursday the 28th.
So what you need to do, just to make this clean, is one of three of you,
We call a special meeting.
call a special meeting, so I don't care what three, don't need four, just three. And just, someone send me a note saying, or three of you send me a note saying you wanna have a special meeting 6:30 on the 28th regarding the master plan.
6:30 here, same
Yeah.
bit. same-
So, Colleen, were you gonna call that then, or did you wanna call it, or?
I
are we-
can
are we
we-
calling
Well,
it
we
now?
need three,
Vote for
we
that
need
right
three
now
trustees
tonight?
to call it. All
I'll
right,
do it.
Mark,
Can we
Mark
just
and I.
motion to call that tonight?
Don't think so.
We
I
can't
think-
make motion, we can't
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that at
No,
a
we'll
workshop.
It's just
We
three trustees.
can't schedule our next meeting within the.
Us three are calling the meeting.
We're calling the
That's
meeting.
ridiculous.
Okay,
I'll send you an email
so send me an email,
with copying you guys.
copy you guys,
And then let you forward it to Bill.
there you go.
My only
Or-
question there would be, what about getting this thing done before we have the next, council meeting on the 25th?
Well, we were
Won't be.
discussing that.
Yeah.
Then he asked if I was gonna be around. I said, I'm not gonna be around next week.
Yeah,
This
this is
week.
not, we're not gonna make a rush for this. I
And
mean,
then
got
it just gotta go
63
back
days,
to
you
them to edit it, and
Yeah.
it won't.
I mean, they already got some homework that they can
When do
look
the
at
63
too, so.
start? Once we get back to planning?
Once it gets, you pass the, what's the word I'm looking for? Not a motion, but,
Recommendation?
resolution.
Oh,
You take a resolution and then that goes and it starts the clock ticking for 63 days, so.
okay. I have enough of those little you, Dan, it's like, spring cleaning, don't
We
do that
actually got a
stuff.
lot to do.
It's
Yeah.
clutter.
I was,
Well, it's supposed to be the first 60 pages.
I gotta
Should have
warn
been
you.
easier.
about 15 minutes.
Okay,
When
so-
we
That's
get
what-
to the
that's what
implementation
scares me.
steps, that's gonna take.
I'd like to make a
little
motion
bit
to
more
adjourn.
time.
Well, you can't make a motion.
Yeah, you
Well,
can.
we
The
got-
first 60 pages.
That's what I
We
said
should've just-
earlier.
But
Damn.
when it
Okay, the
comes to
motion
this-
Those last 10 pages.
Can't the
last
chairman
10
just say,
pages.
okay, I adjourn?
No,
Order.
no,
You're on a roll there.
Call-
Skornica, who seconded?